Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Week 7 Commish Report, where I break down the week that was, preview the week to come, and go over the standings in the league which I'm the commissioner for, called the League of Shiva. So, we're also going to do something a little bit different this week, where at the end of the episode, we're going to actually go over what the playoff picture looks like at this point, and what who would be in the playoffs if the playoffs were to start right now. So let's get to it. First of all, just have to say I'm very excited. Got my playoff beard going, got my Sox hat on and my shirt. I'm very excited for Game 1 of the World Series tonight, but right now it's all about football. So let's talk about the League of Shiva. And first of all, we'll start with the matchup of the week, which would have to be my Big Fat 77s winning over the New Hampshire Madmen. The final score was 102-102. Now, this was a battle of the best record in the league, and we both started out the week at 5-1, and then it came down to whoever won this matchup would wind up with the best record in the league. In my Week 6 report, I called Dave out, stating that his New Hampshire Madmen would need a lot more than 72 points to beat my Big Fat 77s. Well, he managed to put up 102 points. However, my team also scored 102 points. And, of course, in this league, the tiebreaker is the quarterback matchup, which in this case was Peyton Manning for me versus Nick Foles for Dave. Dave also has quarterback Russell Wilson and quarterback Robert Griffin III, but decided to leave them on his bench and go with Nick Foles. This choice proved to be fatal, as RG3 scored 31 points, Russell Wilson scored 25, and Foles only wound up with 5 points. So I dodged some bullets there. Had he played either Griffin or Wilson, he would have won outright without even needing the tiebreaker. The final nail in the coffin for Dave, though, was that he had a 5-point lead going into Monday night. He did not have anyone left to play and was sitting at 102 points. I, however, had Victor Cruz going Monday night for the winless Giants. I needed 5 points from Cruz in order to win, and of course the Giants did wind up picking up their first win of the year. And that's what I got. I barely got exactly 5 points from Victor Cruz, and that was after he dropped a touchdown pass in the end zone from Eli Manning, that is, which would have sealed the deal. Lucky for me, as I now own the best record in the league at 6-1, having won 5 matchups in a row now. New Hampshire Madmen dropped to 5-2 after suffering this heartbreaking loss. From the best of the week to the worst of the week, now the poop matchup of the week would have to go to the Google This All the Ways and the Binghamtons. Google This All the Way winning 68-67 in a barn burner of poops. You could call this the matchup of the week, but typically my criteria for picking the poop matchup of the week has to do with how many total points was scored by each team. This one was not pretty, especially for John's Binghamton team, who have now dropped 4 straight matchups in a row and is slowly moving away from hopes of a postseason appearance. Binghamton has 3 players post 2 or fewer points, including a huge goose egg put up by Binghamton's running back, Steven Jackson, who actually did not play on Sunday. Unfortunately, you can't win matchups when you have players who aren't playing on your starting roster. However, he still had a chance on Monday night when he had Giants tight end Brandon Myers going, and Chris's Google This All the Way team was done for the week at 68 points. John only needed 3 points from Myers to win the matchup, since a tie would have gone to Chris. Binghamton's chances were thwarted, however, after Myers only got him 1 point. Binghamton now loses 4 straight, remains in the basement of the league as the Sacco with a record of 1-6. Google This All the Way improving to 4-3 on the season, now having a record of over 500 and squeaking by the Binghamtons. Now on to a matchup that would have been the poop matchup had it not been for Binghamton and Google This All the Way only putting up a collective 135 points. Hump Day Camels beating the Mile High Social Club 84-70. Dan's Mile High Social Club couldn't handle Linda's Hump Day Camels this week. His team only put up 70 points, and he had 6 of his 9 players with 7 or fewer points. That's brutal, including a 0-point performance out of Pittsburgh wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders. Hump Day Camels got a terrific performance out of her starting quarterback Andrew Luck, scoring 35 points for her, which was actually half of her total points for the week. The Hump Day Camels still left a huge performance from Vincent Jackson on her bench and would have scored a bit more if she had played her Colts defense instead of her Pittsburgh defense. I'm sorry. I know I told you to play the Pittsburgh defense, but I'm sorry. Sometimes you get it wrong. However, she managed to pull off a win and moves to 3-4 on the season as Dan's Mile High Social Club falls to 2-5 for the year and has a big obstacle to dodge in Week 8 against my team, the Big Fat 77s. Moving onward and upward, the Some Things You Can't Unsee Bros winning 126-97 over the Nocho Cincos. This matchup was somewhat tightly contested, but my Mother Deb's Nocho Cinco team had Danny Amendola on her active roster. And we all know he was inactive on Sunday's game versus the Jets. She did, and don't get me started about that game versus the Jets. I don't even want to talk about it. She did have some players on her bench that had bye weeks in Week 7. However, she only had one spare wide receiver. Leaving that goose egg on her roster basically cost her the matchup, as Timmy's Some Things You Can't Unsee Bros had huge performances from his backup quarterback, Andy Dalton. Got him 39 points. And AJ Green got him 28 points. Wow, Cincinnati with a bunch of points on the board this week. He also had a pretty big day from running back Chris Johnson, getting him 18 points. Cruising to victory and remaining on top of his division at 5-2, and with the loss, Nocho Cinco's now dropped to 2-5 on the year. Now to wrap up the week's matchups, the Doug Tatership beat the Philly Cheesesteaks 114-90. Despite a stellar performance from quarterback Matthew Stafford, getting Jeff's Philly Cheesesteaks 39 points, 7 out of his remaining 8 players had fewer than 10 points and ended up costing him the matchup in the end. The Doug Tatership had huge days from quarterback Aaron Rodgers with 29 points, wide receiver Calvin Johnson coming back from injury with 34 points up on the board, and a whopping 22 points from his Carolina Panthers defense. Doug even had some huge numbers on his bench, 25 from Harry Douglas, 22 from Ryan Matthews, 14 from Zach Stacy, but it didn't matter that these points were left on his bench because Doug winds up winning his second straight matchup and moves up to 3-4 on the season. Philly Cheesesteaks with the loss fall to 4-3. So now, let's preview Week 8's matchups. All 5 matchups in Week 8 are actually interdivision matchups, meaning that each team is playing a team in the opposing division. Since you only play each team from the opposing division once, that means each of these matchups will be the first and last times that they meet in the regular season. So, starting off with my Big Fat 77s at 6-1, taking on the 2-5 Mile High Social Club. Big Fat 77s are so far projected for 152 points, as the Mile High Social Club is in an absolute bye-week hell situation. We'll see what moves he makes going into Week 8, but Dan, if you're watching, you're my next victim, bro. And I know you're the biggest Broncos fan in the world, so I'll feel bad beating you up with Peyton and Julius Thomas, but not too bad. Moving on, Philly Cheesesteaks at 4-3, taking on the 5-2 Some Things You Can't Unsee Bros. Both of these teams are dealing with bye weeks as well, bye week woes, that is. Philly Cheesesteaks having Ray Rice, Brandon Marshall, and Antonio Gates on bye weeks in Week 8. And Timmy's Some Things You Can't Unsee Bros have the likes of Torrey Smith and Chris Johnson also on bye weeks this week. So far, the projections are slating that this is a potential poop matchup of the week, but only time will tell that story. Moving on now, Google this all the way at 4-3, taking on the 2-5 Nocho Cinco. A little mother and son matchup here. My mother's Nocho Cincos are projected for over 100 points, and Chris's Google this all the way team is currently slated for 133 points. This could potentially be a close matchup, and very well could wind up being the matchup of the week. Binghamton at 1-6, taking on the Doug Tatership at 3-4. This is an important matchup for the Doug Tatership, and an even more important matchup for Binghamton. Neither team has any major concerns with bye weeks. However, the way it looks with the projections right now, Doug should be able to win this matchup. If John's Binghamton cannot pull off a win this week, it could prove to be fatal for his team on the season. Doug is hanging on to 7th place in the league as it stands right now, so a win is just as important for him as only 6 teams get into the playoffs. So this could wind up being a tightly contested matchup for sure. New Hampshire Madmen at 5-2 wraps up the week taking on the Hump Day Camels. Linda's Hump Day Camels are looking to hang on to their playoff hopes as well, as she currently sits in the 6th and final position in the league. She has the tall task of playing the New Hampshire Madmen, coming off a tough loss on a quarterback tiebreaker against my Big Fat 77s. Depending on moves they make this week leading up to game time, so far New Hampshire Madmen are projected to win. Hump Day Camels dealing with the Colts bye week will have to sit Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton, and her Colts defense. So that does it for the preview of Week 8 and the wrap-up of Week 7. Now we'll take a look at the standings and the playoff picture. So, thanks for joining me for this week's Commish Report. Make sure you join me next week as we do it all again. And here come the standings. At 6-1 and with nearly 1,000 points for, my Big Fat 77s are alone atop the entire league and the North Division. New Hampshire Madmen in second in the North at 5-2. Google This All the Way and Philly Cheesesteaks tied at 4-3 as Binghamton rounds out the division with a lowly 1-6 record. As for the South Division, the Some Things You Can't Unsee Bros still holding strong atop the division and holds the second seed at 5-2. Hump Day Camels and the Dugtatorship tied at 3-4, and the basement teams in the South are the Mile High Social Club and Nocho Cinco at 2-5. And taking a look at the playoff picture, with Week 14 rapidly approaching and the start of the 2013 playoffs in the League of Shiva, this is how the current playoff picture looks. If the playoffs were to start this week, Big Fat 77s and the Some Things You Can't Unsee Bros have the first week bye, as the two matchups would be the number 4 seeded Google This All the Way versus number 5 Philly Cheesesteaks, and the number 3 New Hampshire Madmen taking on the number 6 Hump Day Camels. Let's see if any of this changes after Week 8. Until then, this is Jamie Comrie signing off, and I'll see you later.